Everyone who plays video games has games that have had a big impact on them that sticks with them for a long time after playing them. Sometimes the impact these games have is so big that it ends up sticking with us forever and becomes part of who we are. Because of this, whenever we look back at these games, we get reminded of how amazing the experience with it was and how much it changed us after playing them. Eventually, these games end up becoming our favorite games after going back to it, only to realize that no matter how many times we play them, we don't really get tired of them. For me, when I think about this, 5 games come to mind. One of these games is an indie game, a game about climbing a mountain. Celeste is an indie game that was released in 2018 by Maddy Games, an indie video game studio that had previously released a game called Towerfall. While Towerfall was a platformer which focused more on defeating enemies inside what could be considered an arena, Celeste was a platformer that focused more on the journey of its main character, Madeline, as she tries to climb a mountain as a way to challenge herself in hopes that it will help her deal with her struggles. While Celeste may seem like a regular platformer at first glance, it is more than that, as it takes you through a challenging journey with the difficulty of the game increasing as you progress through it. Because of its difficulty, gameplay, and message, Celeste quickly rose in popularity among gamers, and even those who weren't big fans of the genre were talking about it. It got so popular that it became one of the nominees for Game of the Year at the Game Awards in 2018, making it the second indie game to ever be nominated for this award at this event, with Inside being the first to be nominated for the award back in 2016. While it didn't win the award, it was still a big achievement for a game that was simply described as a game about climbing a mountain. This will only add to the popularity of the game, reaching even more people than it had before. As a kid, I wasn't a big fan of video games. I would mostly spend my free time playing outside or watching TV. And it's not like I didn't have access to games or anything like that. I actually grew up in a household full of gamers. I remember watching my parents play Super Mario Bros. 3 and Duck Hunt on NES, and my sister played games like The Legend of Zelda, Ocraina of Time, and Donkey Kong 64 on the Nintendo 64. But when it came down to me actually picking up the controller and playing them, I will get bored after like an hour or so and will stop and once again go outside to play with toy cars, marbles, or just about anything. Even just swinging sticks around was more fun for me than playing video games. The only game that I will actually get somewhat engrossed in was Ocarina of Time. I remember getting lost in the game without realizing it, especially running around the open field of Hyrule. I loved it. But even after having so much fun with it and being the first game I ever actually got into, I never beat it. It wasn't until I played my cousin's PlayStation 2 that I got interested in video games. I remember going over to my grandmother's house every Sunday and going to my cousin's room to play with his PS2. While I mostly only played Dragon Ball Budokai Tenkaichi 2 with him, it was the first time I would play a game without wanting to stop, something that hadn't happened with any other game I had played up until then, besides Ocarina of Time. So, when I asked my dad for a PS2 with the game, he did his best to get it for me, since I had never asked for anything like that before, and I would rarely ask for anything as a kid to begin with. He ended up getting me a handful of games with it so that I won't get bored of playing just Budokai Tenkaichi 2. Among those games was God of War 2, Sly Cooper, Sly 2, Band of Thieves, Ratchet and Clank, Jak and Daxter, and Jak 2. At first, I was having a lot of fun playing all these games, and for a while, that's all I would do in my free time instead of going outside like I usually will. But eventually, I started playing less and less and started spending most of my free time playing outside again. Especially because around that time, I was starting to pick up soccer and would practice it and play it more than before. It got to the point that I was playing games like once a week, and even when I would barely play for like an hour or so. I remember during that time, the only game I actually finished was Jak and Daxter, but that was it. I never finished any of the other games I had back then. As I went through elementary school, I started playing less and less games until eventually I stopped playing them altogether. Then, during my first year of middle school, my parents got a Wii for Christmas with Wii Sports. I decided to give it a try after seeing my family playing it and having a lot of fun with it, and I immediately was hooked. I once again started getting into video games and wanted to play them more. Then one day, as I was walking through Walmart, I saw a game that caught my attention. That game was The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. Up until then, I was under the impression that the only Zelda game that existed was Ocarina of Time, so I was surprised to see another game in the series. I was intrigued by it, especially since Ocarina of Time was the first game I really got engrossed in. Even if I never actually finished it and eventually stopped playing it, I was really curious about it, and so I asked my mom for it, and she got it for me. That same day, when I got home, I started playing it and was immediately hooked. I ended up beating the game in like a week, which back then was really surprising since I barely played any video games, and so it became the second game I actually ever finished. After that, I started playing more and more games and even went back and finished some of the games I hadn't as a kid, like God of War 2, Sly Cooper, Ratchet and Clank, Jak 2, and I finally got to finish Ocarina of Time. But even though I was starting to get more into gaming, I would mostly only play third-person games. So, whenever my parents will ask me to play older games with them, like Mario Bros. 3, Pac-Man, or the original Sonic, I will play with them for a bit, but I will get bored pretty quickly and will opt to just watch them play instead. I'm not sure why, but games where I couldn't see the character fully in 3D and I could control it freely just didn't appeal to me. This continued on all through middle school and high school, with me only playing this type of games and nothing else. But that will all change in 2018. During my first year of college, I got a part-time job. Back then, the Switch was the most popular console in the world, and I had been eyeing it for a while along with the newest Zelda game, Breath of the Wild. But I didn't really want to ask my parents for it because of how expensive it was. Even though I knew they would have done everything to get it for me since they always did, I didn't want to bother them with it. Since I had scholarships which allowed me to go to college for free, I was able to use the money I earned from my part-time job to purchase a Switch for myself with a copy of Breath of the Wild. Once I started playing it, I was immediately hooked and would play for hours until I beat it. Then, I started looking for other Switch games to play. Now that I was earning my own money, I could buy games without having to ask my parents for them, since I always felt bad about asking them for anything. So for the first time, I started buying games that I became interested on as soon as I was remotely interested in them. But again, there were only games that were third-person games, since those were the only ones I found interesting. After buying a few more games, I started looking in the eShop, mostly because I had heard from a few friends that there were some good games that didn't have physical copies on there. While I had heard about indie games, I didn't know much about them and I wasn't really interested in them all that much. So even though there were a lot of indie games on the eShop, I would just scroll by them. There was only one indie game that had caught my eye since it was the same style of games I liked back then. That game was called The First Tree, a game about a female fox who goes on a journey to find her kids. It's a beautiful game about the hardships of life and how important our childhood memories are to us, even the ones that we try to forget because of how painful they are. It was the first indie game I ever played and enjoyed. But even after playing it, I didn't check out any other indie games since most of the ones I had heard of were 2D style and they never really caught my attention. That is, until the summer of 2019. Me and my family were getting ready to go on a trip to Florida for a vacation. I had decided to take my Switch with me to play it on the ride there so I won't get bored. I decided to look for some games that were on sale on the eShop to buy a couple of them for the trip. That's when I ran into Celeste, a game I had been hearing a lot about from multiple people. I had heard nothing but positive things about it and I saw that it was on sale, so I decided to give it a chance and bought it, not really expecting much from it. 1 hour into the car ride, I decided to go ahead and give Celeste a try. I booted up the game and started playing it. At first, I wasn't impressed by it and it seemed boring to me. I wasn't a fan of the 2D style and the gameplay was not something I was used to at all since I hadn't played any platformers since I had tried playing Super Mario Bros. 3 years before as a kid. One thing I was sure about though was that this game was harder than any other game I had played in a while. Not only was I not good at platformers, but this one required very accurate jumps and dashes, the two main functions in the game, in order to progress through what felt like very tight spaces where even just brushing the wrong pixel will kill me. This will usually turn me away from games and I will get frustrated with them after a while and would rather move on to other games that weren't as hard and I could progress through them easier. But for some reason with Celeste, it made me want to keep on playing. Unlike other games where I will die a lot and quit after a few tries, every time I died in Celeste, I will stop and think what it was that I was doing wrong and then will come up with a strategy that will help me beat the part I was stuck on. Then, once I was able to beat that part, I will feel a big sense of satisfaction I had not felt with the game in a long time. Regardless of how many tries it took me, I never once thought of things like, finally, or God, I hated that. But rather, I would think to myself stuff like, let's go, or alright, time for the next one. Every time I beat a level, it will only push me to keep on playing the game. Slowly, I started getting very engrossed in it overall. That's when I started to notice more things about Madeline. At first, it wasn't clear to me why she was climbing this mountain, but as I started paying more attention to the dialogue, I noticed that there was a deeper meaning behind it all. Madeline needed to do this as a way to prove to herself that she could do anything she put her mind to, without having to rely on anyone else but herself. She was clearly trying to get over something. In chapter 2 of the game, we are introduced to Madeline, someone who at first appears to be Madeline's alter ego, who is trying to stop her from achieving her goal by trying to convince her that she's not capable of doing it and to just turn back around and forget all about climbing the mountain. Madeline ends up running from her as she tries to stop her. Then at the end of the chapter, Madeline receives a phone call from her ex that reminds her of their breakup, and we learn that Madeline struggles with anxiety and more than likely depression as well. Throughout the game, we also meet interesting characters like Celia, an old woman who lives on Celeste Mountain who seems to always make fun of Madeline for attempting something so reckless. Theo, another climber who seeks out adventure in places where he can take awesome pictures for his social media. And Mr. Oshiro, a spirit of a hotel manager who died in his hotel on Celeste Mountain. While Theo is always staying positive and tries to cheer up Madeline in any way he can, Celia and Mr. Oshiro make things worse for her at the start, especially Mr. Oshiro. Yes, I'm still not a big fan of him. But towards the end, Celia gives her advice on conquering her fears and anxiety, essentially claiming that she believes in Madeline, and she knows she can do it but needs to stop running away from her feelings, but rather face them head on. After that, Madeline decides to confront Madeline and have a heart-to-heart talk with her, and we finally get to understand their feelings. When I got to this part, I finally realized that Madeline wasn't the bad guy at all, and she was also scared of what might happen if Madeline kept climbing the mountain, hence why she kept trying to stop her. I started to think of Madeline as a manifestation of Madeline's insecurities, something that, like Celia said, she needed to face on in order to accomplish her goals without feeling like something was holding her back. And all the characters show her that it is okay to rely on others and not try and take everything in yourself. I especially love the part where Theo helped Madeline calm down by teaching her the floating feather trick. And yes, even Mr. Oshiro taught her that you never know what someone might be going through, so you shouldn't be too quick to judge them on their behavior. It could just be a coping mechanism, and about how you shouldn't keep everything inside because one day it could get to a point where you can't hold it in and you end up snapping at someone who was only trying to help. While these were not excuses for the way Mr. Oshiro treated Madeline, it is important to think about this because one day we could end up in his shoes and blow up at someone who doesn't deserve it if we keep bubbling everything up inside. So while I may not like his behavior, I can sympathize with it. This game is more than just a game about climbing a mountain. It's a game about the struggles many people deal with that we don't notice. Even the game seems to prioritize the player's mental health by leaving messages like you don't need to get all the strawberries just to impress your friends, or it is important to take breaks in between levels. While there are a lot of games that do this, for me, there has never been a game that does it like Celeste. These messages make it feel like the developer truly cares about the mental health of the player and how the difficulty of the game could be affecting them. Not to mention, the music is so calming, even in sections where it's sped up as the difficulty of the level increases. I can't tell you how many times I stood still in the game after dying to a level a lot, just listening to the music to help me calm down and keep a clear head. As I was nearing the end and climbing through the last chapter, I was feeling a wave of emotions that I hadn't felt in a game in a long time. I was excited, happy, and anxious the closer I got to the peak of the mountain. Then, when I finally made it to the top, all those emotions were away and were replaced by a sense of peace. I remember staring at the scenery for what felt like hours, just taking it all in and thinking to myself I did it with a smile on my face. A smile that only grew more as the credits rolled through the screen and I got to see Madeline and Madeline getting along with each other and finally understanding one another. While this game taught me important things about life, it also taught me just how beautiful and amazing indie games and 2D style games can be. It was thanks to Celeste that I started playing indie games and I went back and played all those games I had missed out on because I didn't like the style of them. Games like The Minish Cap, The Messenger, Undertale, but most of all, I will never forget the smile and excitement on my parents' faces when I asked them if we could play Mario Bros 3. I remember how much fun all of us had that day, something I will never forget as it was the first time I truly sat down with both of my parents and played a game with them that the three of us enjoyed. As I played through Celeste for this video, all of these memories get back to me, and while I have played through the game many times, I realize I will never get tired of it no matter how many times I play it. I owe a lot to this game, and I genuinely believe that I wouldn't be the same if I had not played it. Celeste is a beautiful game that I truly believe everyone should play. Thank you for watching until the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, I would really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe. Have a good morning, day, or night, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.